timely topic, and I think it'll be a great topic. So, if without further ado, please help me welcome Ambassador Crouzat.
It's a subject that I'm very interested in because in my previous position, I was a diplomatic advisor to the Minister of Environment, Ségolène Royal, who was president of COP21 right after 2015, December 2015. And I was immersed in COP21 issues, climate change issues, from 2014 till 2017. So before, during, and after COP21. So I'd like to perhaps share the experience that I had and see how, first of all, how this incredible COP21 event took place, how we organized it, what we wanted out of it, what we got, how we dealt with the aftermath of COP21. And then in the second part, I would like to try and see where we stand now today on the climate issues, what we can do on an international stage, and what France itself does on that respect. France decided to put forward its candidacy back in 2012, and at the time there was nobody wanted to host the decisive COP that everybody said would be the one that would deliver an agreement. Nobody wanted it because nobody believed in the capacity for mobilization on the world stage. Remember what happened in 2009, the Copenhagen conference, which was a total and utter disaster. And so there was not much appetite for anybody to take that risk. So France decided to take the risk. President Hollande at the time went for it. And we sort of set in motion the full political and diplomatic force that we French think we have. So that meant government, in all parts of government were mobilized. It meant an incredible logistical preparation, because you realize that a COP conference is not just a few hundred people, it's actually 40,000 13 that come to a specific place. So it's literally a small city that you have to build for the 13-day conference of a conference of the parties. There was also the question of finance, very important, because all these countries that are developing countries and say, hey, for 150 years you've been emitting all these great greenhouse gas to develop your own country, you can't expect us to make an effort without you helping us with the damage that you've done for the last century and a half, if not more. So the finance issue was extremely important, hence the commitment to have $100 billion a year transferred from developed countries to developing countries every year on climate. So arrives December 2015 at a very rather tragic juncture, because you might remember that a few days before there was a horrible terrorist attack in France, left 180 people dead in Paris, and there was suddenly this question: should we go ahead with organizing the biggest event that has ever taken place in the world on a diplomatic front? And the security concerns were just totally nightmarish. We decided to go ahead with it, and of course we were very. It was the right decision, of course. So the method was very important during COP21. Imagine 40,000 people, 20,000 of whom are direct negotiators. It's just a complete madhouse. So what you have to do is to get everybody on board and do not have secret negotiations on the side between countries. So the idea was to have no secret text, always be transparent, always be inclusive, and that's really learning from the Copenhagen mistakes. And one mistake in Copenhagen that was made was to have the heads of state and government, 2009, come at the very end of COP21. So, it was COP, what was it? 12 or 11, I can't remember now. 15, sorry, it was 15. It was a mistake because at the time, everybody's negotiating and they couldn't take the decisions because they knew the big boss was going to come at the end of the week, and they left all the difficult subjects for the big boss to resolve. Now imagine the big bosses, heads of state, heads of government, arriving at the tail end of the conference. It's such technical issues, it's extremely difficult to grasp, and so nothing was ready. There was no text, and then it was complete jamboree of huddles here, huddles there, and it just failed dramatically. So the idea there was to do the reverse, to have 150 heads of state and government arrive at the very beginning, and that created an incredible impulse. When we had all of them turning up saying, you have to deliver, it really gave a mandate to the negotiators to deliver. And I think that was one of the reasons we succeeded. However, less encouraging is the situation today, because we have to confess that we are far behind in the goal that the Paris Agreement set the world. The goal is to have not to exceed 2 degree increase in temperature, and hopefully limit the increase to 1.5 degrees. So in effect, the ultimate goal is not to increase, to be as close as possible to an increase of 1.5 degrees. We're already at 1, and we feel that if within the next generation we haven't sorted ourselves out, it will be completely over. And then finally, at the international level, we have France has been very active. First of all, you'll remember the Make Our Planet Great Again speech by my president, which was a fantastic catchword to attract as many researchers, many of whom were in the States, to come to France to pursue their research on climate change. And it has proved extremely successful. We've had researchers from all over the world come to France and pursue their research on the climate. And also we have taken some firm stands, like what do we do in our free trade agreements with countries that do not respect the Paris Agreement, and my president has been extremely vehement about not signing trade agreements with such countries. So that put a hold on negotiations with the US. It's also could put a hold on the deal that was agreed with Mercosur, since we think that Brazil is not abiding to its commitment in terms of our environment and the climate. Very recently at the G7, we committed to double in fact, our contribution to the Green Climate Fund, putting our contribution to 1.5 billion euros, which is very significant. The UK did the same, Germany did the same, many other countries, Nordic countries, have done the same. So that is encouraging, considering the US decided to backtrack on their commitment. They pledged $3 billion at the time of the Obama administration, and that is not materializing due to the Trump administration for this Green Climate Fund. So a lot to be done, a lot has been done, but still the work is certainly absolutely needed for this existential issue. Thank you very much.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay. The first is, you talked a lot there about renewable energy, but France is obviously leaning very heavily on nuclear energy, and I want to know if you think that the future is nuclear. And the second question is about climate refugees from the global south. So obviously the first ones are already on the move, but we already have a refugee crisis in Europe. And I know that France has obviously upped international aid quite a lot, but I want to know what you think we're going to do whenever they start arriving at Europe's door.
Well, starting with the second part of the question, I mean, it's a huge issue, obviously. The climate refugees and the figures that are being put forward in terms of displacement are completely staggering. And when you think of the evolution of demography, within a generation we'll have an extra billion people in Africa. So you suddenly you want those people in Africa to stay in Africa to develop their continent rather than to flee the continent and try to come to the nearest continent, which is Europe. So it is a huge issue, and that's why we have to tackle climate change, particularly for this. In terms of nuclear energy, that's also a very good point because it bedeviled the national debate in France for many years now. As you know, we have 75% of our energy currently, of our electricity is generated through nuclear energy. We have 56 nuclear plants around the country, built mostly in the 70s, 80s, getting rather old, need to be replaced, very expensive. There's a whole debate about what do you do with déchets nucléaires, what's it called in English, the waste, the nuclear waste, and so the compromise that was arrived at in the 2015 law on energy transition was to say, okay, we currently have 75% of our nuclear energy of our electricity from nuclear energy. We'll decrease that to 50% by 2025, and we'll replace the decrease with renewable energy, solar, wind in particular, onshore, offshore. So that was fine. And then a few years later, i.e. now, a couple of months ago, there was the realization that 2025 was just not feasible. It was simply not feasible. So the government said, okay, well, we'll wait an extra 10 years. And so we set the date at 2035 to downscale nuclear energy from 75% to 50%. So it's really, and that actually was a very fraught debate because our Minister of the Environment, Nicolas Hulot, was really quite against to lump it, basically, and then eventually resigned. And that was one of the reasons probably that he did. And then we'll go towards the front.
Why do you think the French public acted so badly towards the increased fuel taxes, even though it's like part of measures to basically improve the environment? But why do you think the French public reacted so badly to it, even though we're trying to shift towards an environmentally friendly society at the moment? Well,
it came as a real surprise to the government, but it was probably the conjunction of several factors. First of all, disgruntlement on many issues, but also on the more conjuncturel aspect. Petrol prices kept going down, and so since we had the tax going up incrementally, the price of petrol at the pump was sort of steady. Nobody saw that more and more was in fact taxes, and particularly climate taxes, carbon taxes. And when suddenly the price of raw oil went up, and suddenly created a dynamic effect, and a very visible effect, and you had all these people in the countryside who, are not rich enough to even avail themselves of the opportunity of buying an electric car or whatever, a clean car, when they have an old diesel car, because they just don't have 10,000 euros, let alone the money that's needed to do the switch. And so that was the realization that why should we have no choice, living in the country, bear the brunt of this tax? And so it sparked the flames.